Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Big Tom, written by Sjanevardsson. Thomas, Big Tom Wilson, pulled strips of meat out of the smoker. The hard needles the trees dropped from time to time made an excellent smoke sauce, somewhat like apple wood. The meat came from the small creatures he caught in traps around his garden. He turned off the smoker's burner coil and doused the still smoldering needles in the tray above the coil. Satisfied that he wouldn't waste any smoke fuel, he carried the strips of meat into the cabin he called home, or rather, the emergency shelter he called a cabin he called home. After a day spent smoking meat, the meat smell had seeped into his clothes, his skin, his long hair, and his beard. He had checked into the shelter's water level. It would do him for a moment, but he'd need to collect more water in the next couple of days. He stood in front of the mirror and cut his beard short with the one knife he had. He had tried to shave with a knife once. That was one time too many. Judging his beard to be somewhat even, he stripped and stepped into a tiny shower. A quick rinse, a thorough scrub, and another quick rinse, and he was done. He put on his second set of clothes. He put his smoky set in the decon sanitizer. It was a quick way to clean them without using water. If there were spills, mud, blood, or yellow goo from the plants he called the snot vines, he'd wash that out with water first. Usually. Sometimes. The once white clothes were a dingy grey with a collection of stains of varying natural and unnatural colors. He set up the camera facing the kitchenette and turned it on. "Hey, fans! Welcome to the Big Tom's cabin. Big Tom here on day 797. Today, I'll be making bean soup with the snot vine beans from my garden and the smoked meat of a snot vine creepers. If you don't like the common names I've given them, you're free to call them anything you like. I'm still working on the phylogenetic tree on this planet, so giving anything a scientific name now is premature. They creep around the snot vines with their soft-boned, thin-furred bodies and nip off the buds that will turn into a bean pod, so, snot vine creepers. Anyways, here's the meat I smoked today, which will add that smoky flavor to the broth. Remember, stock is made from simmering bones in water. Broth is made from simmering meat and all vegetables in water. Because the critter's soft bones turn to powder when trying to roast them and turn to gelatin when cooked in water, I'll stick to making a broth. The broth will use their smoked meat and these flowers that taste like onion." After talking through the recipe and preparation techniques, which were of no use outside of the planet Big Tom found himself, he set his pot to simmer and sat in front of the camera. "Well, that's cooking. It's time for another Big Tom story, I guess. 'Cause, I think I ran out of stories to tell, except, maybe, to explain how I ended up here in the first place. I don't mean the lander crash, or dragging the shelter to the nearest flat ground, or any of that. Someone out there is probably wondering why I would volunteer to survey a planet so far that it was a one-way mission. From Earth's point of view, it took me 96 years to get here. From my point of view, it took 7. This message won't reach Earth for another 74 years. How long after that the colonists would have come, I don't know. This planet is damn near perfect for it, except for one thing." Big Tom heaved a deep sigh. "I've always been the DIY type and lived off the grid more than on, if after getting my doctorate. Whenever there was a study that needed a biologist in a remote jungle, mountain, or desert, I volunteered. When the Eden Project said they needed a biologist, you can bet the first name on that list was Big Tom. I didn't think I'd have a chance, though. You know how many astrobiology doctorates you were handing out while I was focused on microbiology? Too many." Big Tom laughed. "Yeah, imagine my surprise when I was the only biologist that signed up. I'm out here doing the first cataloging of alien biology. And it's awesome. I mean it. I found things that could be classified as eukaryote, plants, animals, and fungus. There are single-cell and single-cell colony species that could be classified as bacteria or archaea. I'll have to add a new one, though. He moved a small clay pot in front of the camera, with what looked like tendrils of glass. As he placed his hand near one side of the other, the tendrils swayed and bent towards the hand. These little guys convert heat to energy. They use that energy to build these long-chain silicates that they use as cell walls to fill their specialized cells with organelles and no nucleus. They pull the silicates from the dirt, leaving behind a carbon-rich soil, while pulling carbon from the air. Various fungus and bacteria rely on these guys to take hold before they can invade and make the soil fit for plants. Whatever we thought about the limitations of RNA stability versus DNA can be put to rest. These guys, unlike all other life on this planet, don't have DNA. They use RNA. They replicate by fragmentation, the root system breaking apart when disturbed. He pushed the pot back out of frame. So far, every sample of this type of life is a variation on these heat-converter glass grasses, of which I have identified 16 species so far. Oddly, every organelle contains a copy of the RNA. Big Tom stretched and groaned. I have a lifetime of work to do here, and a lifetime to do it. I'm healthy, I'm happy, and I couldn't have asked for a better life. That's right, fans. I'm the happiest person in the world, or out of the world, I guess. This time it dinged and Big Tom rose to take the beans off the heat. I'm going to let these cool down before I dig in, but I'll have a little taste. It smells like heaven. He dipped a spoon of broth out and blew on it to cool it before tasting it. Oh my God, this is the best batch yet. The onion flavors made it all the difference. My life would be perfect, except for one thing. He moved to the camera and picked it up. He carried the camera outside, past the garden, to the well-worn footpath that led to the crashed lander. He pointed the camera at the path. Along the edges of the path were freshly picked flowers of the type that he'd used in the soup. Following the flowers, the camera focused on a snot vine creeper tied in a plant-based rope. Beyond that lay a basket filled with snot vine beans. He zoomed the camera in onto the footpath. It was small and similar to the opossum's rear footprint with the 5 well-defined toes and the opposable thumb. These guys do this every 24 days, considering they have 6 digits on their hands, paws, whatever. It kinda makes sense. That's right. It's now been long enough that since the first encrypted message to Control that if they haven't made it public, I will. There is sapient life here. Our little crash landing got their attention, and now there are 2 factions in this area. One leaves these gifts every 24 days. I only see them briefly, though. He zoomed the camera to a small quadruped that reared up in the hind legs and spread its fingers. There were symmetrical designs on its face and body in the bright yellow of the snot vines. That's one of the little guys there. He waved and called out, I'm not your god, you know. You could just come and say hi. The creature disappeared into the brush without a sound. I think they've taken to worshipping me or something. They started doing this every 24 days since I buried Karina, the geologist. That was on day 500. The other group, ouch! He turned the camera in a circle as the small figures rose in the tall grass on the other side of the path and flung rocks at him with slings. Knock it off! Big Tom took a deep breath and let out a loud roar that sent the creatures running. These little shites take every opportunity to throw rocks at me. They know it doesn't do anything except piss me off, but they keep at it. You may be wondering how I know it's 2 different groups. I'm not an anthropologist or whatever the equivalent would be, but I've seen enough. The first group decorates their tail and the graves of Karina and Hassem. They bury their dead there too, and leave grave goods with them. The other groups throw their dead into a cave a little further on, after stripping them of any tools and weapons. Both groups live in shelters built from grass and have equivalent technology. The only social difference I see are the burial rites and personal decoration. Both groups are tribal in nature and seem to be led by the strongest. Of course, the strongest of them can, at most, give me a little boo-boo. The rock-throwing group seems to be doing it to show off their bravery or something. He walked to the lander, showing the graves of his 2 former crewmates. Their helmets sat atop their graves, and fresh flowers and beans had been sprinkled around them. He rotated the camera to show the small mound of the creatures' graves, marked with the round stones and the size of their head similarly adorned. I fear that I've inadvertently introduced religion to the little guys. At first, I was worried that the aggressive group would just wipe them out, but they've never come to blows. In fact, I've seen members of one group move to the other with no friction whatsoever. Big Tom sat against the side of the lander and pointed the camera at himself. So you're thinking that the one thing I don't like is being alone, with Hassan dying in the crash and Karina dying almost a year ago. That's sad, but it's not it. You might think that if I could hear their speech, I might be able to communicate with the little guys, let them know that I'm not a god or a devil or whatever. Unfortunately, their speech is all in ultrasonic range. I'm not even sure whether they can hear me, or just feel the vibrations of my voice. That's still not it, though. It's not even that they figured out pottery by watching me. They can be incredibly sneaky. I realized they'd copied what they saw me doing when I saw more of the clay dug out by the river, and a new fire pit there with a few broken shards. One of them made a little lopsided pot and painted designs on it with the goo from the snot vines and left it just outside the garden. By the way, they're already figured out gardening by themselves, both groups. I copied their design. He brought the camera closer so that his face filled the frame. No! The one thing that gets on my last nerve is what will happen in the future. Long after I'm gone, the lander and the cabin will still be around. They aren't going to deteriorate as much in the next 30 or 40,000 years. That will be enough that someday they'll be watching their little TVs, and some nut with wild fur will just be going on about the ancient aliens were responsible for everything that they ever achieved. And I'm the arsehole that gave that fire fuel. He laughed and moved the camera back before doing a slow pan of the graveyard once more, before turning it back towards himself and the lander. Well, that's enough of that for now. Those beans are good enough to eat, so I'm going to go off to do that. Thanks for watching. Big Tom signing off for the day. End of story. There is a new legend on the horizon. Blueberry Cat has taken the T6 Patreon spot. Thank you very much, and I'm sure that I speak for everyone when I say that. I would just like to thank our T5 members, Lord Azrael, Ambrose Cattell, Quantum Wednesday, Drexoon WRE, Blueberry Cat, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, and Leslie 517. Thank you very much.